in the hour before sunrise. The city was still asleep, but the building already stirred. The glass tower loomed in silence, its windows blushing faintly with the first threads of dawn. And inside, in the hush between night and day, a man named Ezra moved quietly through the corridors. He wasn't in a rush. He never was. Each morning began like this, with a soft click of keys, the swish of a mop handle, and the worn soles of his shoes, brushing gently over polished stone. Outside, traffic lights blinked for empty streets. Inside, time softened, no footsteps but his. No voices but the occasional hum from a vending machine tucked into the wall. Ezra breathed in the quiet, like someone savoring an old song he didn't want to end. Though no one greeted him by name, the building did. It knew him in the creak of the third-floor stairwell, in the flickering panel above the elevator on 9K, in the smell of dust and lemon oil near the accounting wing. He was 67 now, stooped a little at the shoulders. He wore his blue coveralls with a faded patch that read EZRA, though most never looked close enough to read it. But he knew every office. He knew who left dishes in the sink, who brought flowers on Mondays. He knew which chair squeaked and which light switches stuck. He remembered birthdays no one else remembered. Sometimes he'd leave a wrapped mint on a forgotten desk. He never signed his name. On the ground floor, light spilled beneath the vending machine, soft and amber, like the glow of a lantern in a cave. Ezra paused there. He always did. He watched the quiet fizz of a soda can behind the glass, the hum that filled the silence like a lullaby. He wasn't lonely, not exactly, but he lived in spaces between things, between shifts, between floors, between glances never given. There was a peace in that, a rhythm, a solitude that had grown warm with time. Up the elevator shaft, he went slow, creaky ride, and onto floor after floor where the lights stayed dim. He swept gently, the sound no louder than a sigh. Under his broom, dust moved like sleeping clouds. Outside, the moon was sinking behind the skyline. Inside, Ezra moved with practiced grace, as if his hands remembered things his mind no longer needed to name. He worked in loops, in quiet spirals, a ritual, not a routine. At last, he reached the top floor, the CEO's wing, rarely used, rarely disturbed. The doors stayed locked, but the trash, it always came. He had never met the CEO, not truly, just passing glimpses. A coat, a cough, a shadow in the elevator once, years ago, but he cleaned her space with a kind of reverence. He dusted around the books, never moving them. He'd straightened frames he'd never seen anyone glance at. The silence up here was different, heavier, almost sacred. The trash bin was half-dash full, old printouts, crumpled post-its, the sharp smell of espresso still clinging to a stained paper cup. He reached in and paused. Something soft, snot paper, thinner, folded, half buried beneath coffee grounds and shredded memos was a photograph, bent at the corners and smudged at the edges. He pulled it free, slowly, as if lifting it too fast might wake something. The picture was sun-bleached, fragile as dry leaves. It showed a woman seated on a wooden bench, smiling, not at the camera, but at the child beside her, a toddler, curly-haired, arms outstretched behind them, a blur of garden and golden light. The image felt familiar, not in the mind, but in the chest, something warm, something forgotten. Ezra squinted closer. The colors had faded, but not completely, and on the back, scrawled in quick, looping ink, were just a few words. She believed in you when no one else did. Don't forget who you are. He turned the photo over once more. The woman's face, kind, soft-lined, wind-brushed, shimmered at the edge of recognition. Not someone he knew, but someone knew, deeply, and something inside him stirred, not loudly, but gently, like a ripple moving outward in still water. He tucked the photograph carefully into his pocket, not out of curiosity, not even out of mystery, but because it felt like something that deserved to be kept in the basement of the glass tower. It's past the boiler's quiet hum and descent of metal and time. There's a drawer that doesn't belong to any department. It's tucked beneath Ezra's workbench, behind spare mop heads and neatly folded rags. The label reads, "Cleaning supplies, miscellaneous," but inside, it holds what the world forgets. Ezra opens it with care, like lifting the lid of a memory box. Inside, a small ceramic owl with a chipped wing, a child's drawing folded into fourths, a note that once read, "Don't work too late, okay?" in fading green ink. K. Each item a whisper, someone left behind, objects tossed without ceremony, but never truly unloved. He doesn't call it collecting. E calls it remembering. The stairwell to the basement creaks softly when Ezra returns at midday to refill his soap bottles. He pauses to wipe the rail, not because anyone checks, but because it feels wrong to let fingerprints vanish without notice. There's something sacred in tending to what no one sees. A broken clock still hangs near the door, hands frozen at 2:17. Ezra once dusted it weekly, till he realized he liked it, stuck that way, as if time, for a moment, agreed to wait. On the shelf by the lockers, a half-used bottle of jasmine hand lotion sits unopened for years. He leaves it be. Things stay better when left untouched. They leave pieces, always. Not just papers and packaging, but quieter things. A single earring in the break room sink. A list of baby names in the recycling. A sweater folded once, then forgotten forever. Ezra never reads more than a glance will allow. He never intrudes, but he feels the ache of what's let go. The resignation in a coffee mug, still warm when tossed. The way birthday cards end up shredded near the new year. He wonders how many people know what it's like to outlive every photograph of yourself. He's not in many. That's why he keeps the ones of others. One winter, someone threw away a coat. Not torn, just threadbare. The kind you wear when you've stopped hoping to be seen. Ezra brought it home, sewed on a patch, and wore it to sweep the rooftop. Once, he found a card inside a torn envelope. The handwriting shaky, the ink smudged. I simply said, "I'm proud of you." No name, no return address. He didn't know who it was meant for, but he kept it anyway, because some words deserve to be kept alive, even if you don't know who they're meant to save. Tonight, he sets the photo on his desk, beside the drawer that holds other lost things. The woman in it is sitting on a sun-warmed bench, arms curled, around a laughing child. Her smile is soft, but it's her eyes that hold the weight, as if she's watching the photographer with quiet pride. The paper is thin, curled at the corners, a corner stained by coffee or time. He dabs it gently with the edge of his sleeve. The overhead ball flickers, then settles, casting a pale ring of light around the moment now caught in Ezra's orbit. On the back of the photo, it's written in a hand too careful to be rushed, are the words, "She believed in you when no one else did. Don't forget who you are." Ezra traces the letters with a finger, not to read. He's already memorized them, but to feel the indentation. It's the human touch that pressed them into being. He wonders if the CEO read those words before tossing the photo, or if they'd once meant something, and only now no longer do. What is the weight of a sentence? What happens when belief is thrown away? Ezra tucks the photo into his coat pocket, beside the note with no name, the key that unlocks nothing, the crumpled drawing of a cat with 6 legs. She believed in you. It echoes in his mind like a chime in an empty stairwell. He doesn't know the woman in the photo, but he believes in her belief. And that's enough to carry. That kind of faith, once held, never quite disappears. It lingers in the drawer of forgotten things, in the corners of quiet places, in janitors who sweep at dawn. Back upstairs, the offices begin to fill with light and footsteps. Ezra's shift is nearly over, but he walks slower now. Broom, resting like a cane in his hand. The photograph safe beside his heart. He doesn't know what he'll do with it yet, but today he won't throw anything away. Ezra had read the message on the back of the photograph a dozen times, maybe more. Each syllable seemed to breathe differently depending on the light or the hour. Sometimes it felt like a whisper. Other times, a plea. She believed in you when no one else did. Don't forget who you are. He folded the photo carefully, like a sacred scrap of scripture, and slid it into the inside pocket of his worn uniform shirt just beneath his heart. Throughout the day, his hand would drift there, brushing over the soft fabric, checking it was still with him, still saying it, still remembering. He didn't know why it mattered so much, but it did, more than the mop bucket, more than the clatter of keys around his belt, more than anything he'd held in years. There was something about the way the ink clung to the paper, how the letters curved with such quiet tenderness. Whoever wrote it hadn't meant it for the trash. He could almost see the woman in the photograph blink, could almost feel the warmth of the sun on the child's curls. Some part of him ached for them, though he didn't know their names. They had become his company now, wordless, crumpled ghosts held close to skin. That evening, the sky pressed low. Rain whispered against the tall glass windows like fingers tracing forgotten songs. Ezra moved through the halls slower than usual, the polish of the linoleum catching the dull flicker of overhead lights. The building sighed. He sighed with it. He passed the CEO's office again, not cleaning this time, just walking, watching. The lights were on, and there she was, Mirabelle Hart, upright, still, one hand on the windowsill, staring down into the lights of the city, as if searching for a way back into something she had lost long ago. He hadn't seen her this much in years. Usually, she arrived after everyone else and left before dark. Her door always shut like a secret, but lately she was early, often silent, often alone. Ezra paused beside the doorframe, just out of view. The photo in his pocket warmed slightly against his chest. He wondered what it would feel like to show it to her, to say, "This isn't nothing. You threw something away, but it's still speaking." But he didn't knock. He only listened to the quiet and then kept walking. Later, waiting by the service elevator, Ezra overheard voices. Not meant for him, they never were. "She's lost her grip," one said. "We need someone with direction again." A pause. "Then, she's brilliant. But this place needs more than a memory to run on." The elevator pinged, its chime, soft but final. Ezra didn't step in right away. He stood a moment longer in the hush between floor numbers, staring into nothing. He was familiar with things being discarded when they no longer fit, familiar with the slow fade of a person behind their own reflection. The next day, he lingered in the basement longer than usual, the photo cupped in his palm. He remembered the archives tucked beneath the stairs, old ledgers, sign-in sheets, records that hadn't seen daylight in decades. The paper there smelled of time itself. He set to digging, not with haste, but with reverence, as though brushing dust off the past might also steady something fragile in his own chest. And then, an old staff photo, faded ink, blurred edges, but unmistakable. The woman from the bench, not the child's mother, a secretary, named Clara. Clara had worked here long ago, before most of the building's current tenants had even graduated college. Ezra found her name scrawled beside service requests, HR notes, even one faded newsletter headline, "From reception to recognition, a staff star." There was no plaque, no photo on the wall, paper, yellowing and brittle. But to Ezra, she now felt more real than the suits that passed him each morning. She'd done something kind, something quiet, and like the photo, her work had been forgotten, except not completely, not now. Ezra sat in the break room, a room rarely used by anyone but himself, staring at the page with Clara's name. He could almost imagine her voice, steady and warm, guiding a young Mirabelle to apply for that scholarship, believing in her before the boardroom did, encouraging her to rise. It made sense, made feeling. Clara had given her belief freely, and now, in her absence, someone had tried to return it. The message on the photo wasn't just about remembering a woman. It was about remembering what she gave. Ezra looked at his hands, the same ones that wiped windows, fixed jammed doors, and restocked toilet paper. Invisible hands, mostly. But what if, like Clara, he could give something to someone without asking for thanks? What if the story didn't end in the trash? Key began writing something on a yellow sticky note. Slow and unsure, he would leave it. Not signed, not expected, just there, where it might matter. A simple line. She believed in you. I hope you still do too. Back in his closet of a maintenance room, Ezra unfolded the photograph once more. This time, he didn't look at the image. He looked at the writing. The ink had bled slightly from coffee stains and time, but it was still legible. Still speaking. It had outlived doubt, outlived dismissal. It had found its way back to someone who could understand it. Ezra smiled, barely. Sometimes the words we think are lost are just waiting to be held again. And sometimes the smallest ink is the hardest to erase. Ezra sat in the basement break room, alone beneath the soft hum of a tired ceiling fan. The air held a faint scent of coffee grounds and lavender cleaner, a smell that never changed, no matter the season. His pen hovered above a pale square of folded paper. No greeting, no name, just a feeling he needed to place somewhere outside of himself. We are not what others forget. We are what we choose to remember. She believed in you. So do I. His hand trembled slightly, but the ink dried strong. He folded the note carefully and tucked it into an envelope, the kind he used to write Christmas cards no one expected. For once, the act felt enough. The top floor was quiet, the way it always was. Mirabelle's office door was closed, but not locked. It never locked. Ezra eased it open with practiced grace and stepped into the hush of golden stillness. Morning light spilled in through tall windows, pooling gently across her desk like warm water across stone. He placed the envelope beneath the delicate paperweight. A glass crane with its wings poised mid-flight. It had always reminded him of something caught between stillness and motion. Like her, like himself. He didn't linger, just turned and walked out, the door closing behind him with a sigh softer than breath. The rest of the building awoke in usual rhythms. Coffee brewed, emails pinged, shoes tapped across the tile. Ezra moved through it all like he always had, ghost-like and unnoticed, but something within him had shifted. The mop felt lighter, the air less stale. He began to notice the small things again, how the vending machine clicked softly before humming to life, how the sun, caught in the streaks of freshly wiped windows. The note was left behind, but part of him wasn't. Days passed. 3, maybe 4. He avoided the top floor, not out of fear, but out of respect for what should take time. Whatever she did with it, the note no longer belonged to him. Each time he passed her door, he paused, just slightly. But he never looked inside. Outside, trees began to bloom again, their petals sticking to the lobby windows like tiny, hopeful fingerprints. One evening, just past midnight, Ezra rolled his cart down the empty corridor of the 15th floor. He didn't hear her footsteps, only noticed when he looked up and saw her silhouette, paused at the far end of the hallway. Mirabelle, her hair unpinned, her coat loose. She didn't wave, didn't speak, but she stood there a moment longer than necessary. Looked at him, really looked. Moment of acknowledgement passed, quiet and wide as moonlight between windows. Then she walked on, and Ezra kept cleaning. But something in his chest exhaled. It came the next night, tucked neatly between the mop handles and disinfectant, sealed with a gold clasp and no return name. Ezra noticed it right away. He reached for it slowly, carefully, like it might dissolve in his hands. The paper was thick, textured, the kind they used upstairs. The kind not meant for people like him. Inside, a handwritten note. Ezra, thank you for remembering what I couldn't, for honoring someone I owed more than words. The world needs more caretakers, of memory, of place, of heart. You are all three. M.T. He read it twice, then once more, pressing it gently closed, like closing the pages of a sacred book. There was more. A second envelope, beside the first. Official, clean. A promotion letter, effective. Immediately, Ezra Miller is appointed as building historian and keeper of care. A symbolic title, perhaps, but we believe symbols matter. His new duties include morning meditations, K tours, and preservation of this place's quiet stories. K is entrusted with our beginnings and our peace. Beneath it all, wrapped in linen paper, was a photograph. It's a photograph, cleaned, pressed, framed, and at the bottom, beneath the image of Clara and the child, a quote etched in delicate gold ink. Some lives are lifted by silent hands. Ezra didn't smile often, but that night, alone in the elevator, his reflection cracked wide open with one, small, earnest, tired, and glowing. He held the frame gently to his chest and felt something settle. For all the years he had watched others rise, he had never asked to be seen, and now, somehow, the world had looked back and said, "We see you too." Weeks passed. Ezra's old cart still rolled along the hallways at night, but now he also led small groups through the morning quiet. He showed interns how the sunlight hit the stairwell right at 6:15 a.m., told stories of the plants on the windowsills and the names behind forgotten cubicles. He read aloud poems found in desk drawers. Sometimes he just let the silence speak for itself. At 7 o'clock sharp, in a small, glass-walled room near the garden courtyard, he began his morning sessions. "Breath in," he would say softly, "and remember what is yours to carry, and what you may gently set down." Some days, Mirabelle joined. She sat near the back, always quiet, always early. When she left, she often placed a folded paper crane on the edge of the WINDOWSILL. Ezra kept them all in a drawer in the basement, the one where he once kept things others threw away. Now it held only what was given with care. He still cleaned, still moved through silence, but the silence was different now. It knew his name, and for the first time, Ezra didn't feel like a ghost in the walls of the glass tower. He felt like a story still being told. Ezra sat cross-legged on the cool basement floor, the air tinged with lemon oil, paper dust, and the faint coppery scent of old radiators. The drawer, that small, dented drawer, tucked beneath the forgotten shelves, waited without judgment. Its contents had been gathered over decades. Bits and pieces no one wanted, but he couldn't quite let go. Today, he opened it, not as a collector, but as a man ready to breathe a little easier. He smiled softly. Not everything inside had to stay. There was a red mitten with no pair, still warm in memory. He tucked it gently into the lobby's lost and found, where someone might smile to find it. A crumpled doodle of a dinosaur, once drawn by a tired intern on their final day. K? He slid behind a bulletin board on the third floor. Quiet immortality. Silk ribbon, a grocery list, a note that simply said, "Remember." Some he returned. Some he left for others to discover. A few he folded back into the drawer. Not because they were useful, but because they still had breath in them. There was a certain ceremony in cleaning, not for sanitation, but for presence. Ezra wiped the sides of the drawer with a damp cloth, then stood and let the dust swirl gently in the air. It floated like dandelion seeds, weightless and wise. In that moment, the basement felt less like a storage room and more like a chapel, a quiet place where time had been held, gently and without rush. He moved differently now, not because others had changed. They still walked briskly past, his coffees in hand, eyes glued to screens, but because something inside him had been smoothed, like sea glass tumbled in slow waves. He touched the railing with a light hand, paused at the staircase, where morning light spilled like warm tea. He no longer walked to pass time. He walked to listen to it. On the rooftop, behind a rusted service door few remembered, the old stone fountain still trickled. It had been broken once, years ago, and Ezra had fixed it quietly, not with parts, but with patience. Water ran over. Worn stone now, whispering something ancient and content. Once, Mirabelle had stood there too. Said nothing, just listened. That was enough. There was a corner of the building, a narrow balcony no longer marked on the fire plan. Where the city's hum softened to a hush, cars below became whispers. Wind curled around columns like lullabies, told in a language only rooftops understood. Ezra often stood there with a thermos of tea, hands in pockets, heart full in a quiet, unnameable way. He didn't need words for it. The hush was enough. She passed him in the hall one morning. No words, just light, catching the soft lift of her lips. It wasn't the tight smile of protocol. It was the kind you give someone when you both remember something that matters. He nodded. She nodded, and the moment passed like a breeze through open windows. No need to hold it. It had already done its work. In the corner of the library, beside a display of old building photographs, someone had placed the framed picture. Clara, the child, the bench beneath the old elm tree. No caption, no nameplate, just presence. The light from the high windows struck it at just the right angle each afternoon, making it glow, like memory itself had found a place to rest. People paused, not always for long, but enough to notice. That was all. It asked. A group of school children toured the building one day, their voices like birds in early spring. One girl, with ribbon braids and questions in her eyes, pointed to the photo. "Is that your family?" She asked Ezra, her voice curious but kind. He looked at the photo, at the sunlight, at the little dent in the corner of the frame he hadn't quite fixed. Then he smiled, soft and sure. "In a way," Ezra said, voice as warm as worn flannel. "It always was." The girl nodded, as if that made perfect sense. Maybe it did. She ran to catch up with the others, and Ezra stayed behind. Standing in the light, he felt the echo of all he had kept, not in the drawer, but in his chest. And he knew that memory, once cared for, had a way of remembering back. The building breathed. Ezra breathed with it. The drawer no longer needed closing. It had already become part of the story. The wind had a different sound at that hour, like pages turning in a book no one had written yet. Ezra sat quietly in the rooftop garden, the city's breath rising beneath him in waves of soft light and distant birdsong. The garden was small, a scatter of clay pots, stubborn ivy, and a bench too warm to be lonely. Around him, dusk folded the sky into colors that didn't have names, only feelings. On his lap, the photograph was framed now, its edges smoothed by time and care. He didn't look at it. Not right away. Sometimes it was enough just to know it was there. Beside him lay an old company ledger, one of the thick, cloth-bound ones left behind when offices grew digital and cold. Its pages fluttered in the wind, open to a list of names and dates no one remembered. Margins held small notes, scribbled hearts, a doodle of a sun. Ezra watched the pages dance and thought, "Shh. Some things only exist because someone once cared enough to write them down." He let the wind choose the page it wanted to keep open. The rooftop was quiet, but it was not empty. Here, silence wasn't absence, it was memory, held gently in the creak of the bench, in the way the ivy curled toward the last light. In the distant hum of a world too fast to pause, Ezra closed his eyes. He could feel the building exhale. It remembered him. And maybe, just maybe, it always had. He lifted the photo with both hands, brushing away a speck of dust from the glass with his thumb. Not out of habit, out of love. The kind of love that stays quiet. The kind that doesn't ask to be seen, only kept. There were no medals, no ceremonies, no farewell speeches with catered coffee and plastic flowers. But there were things left behind that mattered more. The soap always refilled before it ran out. The light bulbs changed before they dimmed. The drawer that never stuck. The message no one else saw, saved. Remembered, returned. No one ever named a room after him, but every floor carried his touch. Like a hush before dawn. Like a breath held a moment too long, just to feel the weight of being alive. Ezra didn't need his name on the wall. He had it written, softly, in the way things stayed. He rested a hand on the frame, not tightly, as if to say, I'm here, I remember. That's enough. The city blinked, its evening lights awake, but Ezra stayed still, wrapped in golden air and wind-soft echoes. Some people are remembered in statues and speeches, others in the way. A hallway smells of lemon and quiet. In a note left folded, never signed. In a photograph found beneath the weight of 1,000 forgettings. And some stories, like Ezra's, are not shouted. They are whispered. They are hailed. They are never really thrown away.